Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage, and while we are in the middle of the playoffs, sometimes the NBA does not care about that, and they will give breaking news that has absolutely nothing to do with the games going on. Thus was the case this morning as the Boston Celtics have completed a trade with the Oklahoma City Thunder, sending Kemba Walker and a 2021 first-round draft pick, which is number 16, to the Thunder in return for Al Horford, former Celtic, and Moses Brown, somebody we actually did a podcast on earlier this year. And the Celtics also send in a second-round pick in a couple of years. So Kemba Walker goes to the Thunder, Al Horford and Moses Brown coming to Boston. Sap, I have a lot of thoughts about this, but we'll start with you. What were your initial reactions to this?
I'm surprised it happened this quickly, and I'm surprised that it's going to work out pretty well for the Boston Celtics. Kemba Walker was a contract that was going to be very difficult to trade, so you trade one bad contract for another bad contract. You bring back Al Horford, who is older than Kemba Walker, might be slightly healthier. Neither guy is going to be a big minutes guy going forward or someone that you can count on back-to-back nights. So as far as that, I think that the Celtics are getting rid of a worse contract than they're getting back. Thus, the first-round pick has to be thrown in to kind of equal what you're giving and getting in return. I love Moses Brown. We talked about him several months ago. You know, after the All-Star break, Jet, he averaged 10 points and 10 rebounds a game in 24 minutes of action. If he's a 36-minute player, that translates to 15 and 15. I don't think he's going to be that, but you could see that there's potential there. He's only 22 years old. He's 7'2". Went to the same high school that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar went to the same college that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar went to. So that's where the similarities kind of end. And they're also 7'2". I like that they got another big, because now with Robert Williams, Tristan Thompson, and if you want to call Al Horford a big, although he's more of a stretch four, you have a lot of size now, which would lead you to believe that there'll be another move coming. And I'm thinking maybe Tristan Thompson is someone they want to move on from. And maybe they're going to experiment with Moses Brown, Robert Williams III. You hope you catch lightning in the bottle with one of those guys, and you have a rim protector, big, who you could kind of have take up that position. So I like the deal because Kemba Walker wanted out. I didn't think there were really many places that he could go. We did mention Oklahoma City because Sam Presti loves first-round picks. Sam Presti now has 18 first-round picks over the next 7 years. He's going to pretty much dominate the draft for nearly the next decade. And good for Brad Stevens doing a deal, 10 days, 2 weeks after he was promoted to president of basketball operations. If Danny Ainge was still in charge, this deal would not have been done because they would have been haggling over future second-round picks and whatever the case may be. Give Brad Stevens credit. I like the deal because, again, I think Kemba Walker wanted out. Bad contract. You're getting a guy back who can give you some versatility. And Al Horford, he played pretty well in Oklahoma City this year, Jet, although they shut him down because they were tanking. He put up his normal numbers, 13, 14 points, 7 rebounds. That's what you get with Al Horford. I'm assuming, and this leads me to one final thought, that a lot of the guys that decided to leave here, and Kemba Walker wanted out because of the front office. Al Horford left 2 years ago to Philadelphia. We know Kyrie Irving left 2 years ago to go to Brooklyn. And, of course, Gordon Hayward, after 3 somewhat unhealthy, unsuccessful years, decided he wanted to move on. Maybe the issue with the Boston Celtics was Danny Ainge, that Danny Ainge was the person in the front office that turned off all these players, and it wasn't Brad Stevens, because now Al Horford is coming back and seems to be pretty happy about it. So maybe Ainge was the guy that was causing friction from players to coaches to front office staff. And now that Danny Ainge is out, and you've got someone in Brad Stevens who 2 weeks into his regime made a pretty decent trade, I think.
Yeah, I think that there's some credence to that, Sap, that Danny Ainge could have been the problem. I think it's definitely a distinct possibility because, it's not Brad Stevens who's putting the guys' names in trade discussions.
Mm-hmm.
That was the problem, obviously, back in the Ray Allen days. That was the problem with Kemba Walker, has been reported. So it's possible that it's Danny Ainge. I'm not as gung-ho about this trade as you are, Sap. It sort of lends credence to me to your theory that the Celtics ownership has become cheap, because I don't think that swapping Kemba for Al Horford makes them better. I think it puts a lot more scoring burden on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who already have a tremendous burden as it is. I Al Horford, I just don't find to be that valuable of a player anymore because of his age. So the timeline doesn't really add up with Tatum and Brown. You're getting older. Moses Brown is an intriguing player to me, Sap, and I tweeted this out. I'm a little concerned that the Thunder were just willing to just throw him into this trade. They're a young rebuilding team. He's on a good nothing contract. Mm-hmm. That kind of scares me. They're just so willing to part with him. You'd think, okay, 7-2 center on a team that, it's not like they're able to attract free agents or anything like that. Why were they so eager to part with this guy for virtually, nothing? They were absorbing the worst contract. So I'm not sure that there's any real value there if the Thunder clearly don't think there is, and they're pretty good at evaluating young talent. I think that sends off some red flags to me. And a lot of the talk about this trade is that it saves the Celtics money, which is nice. But then they're talking about, okay, this is what they're going to do with the savings. They can re-sign Evan Fournier. Well, I thought that was pretty much a disaster the whole time he was here. He had a couple nice moments, but he's terrible defensively. He's fine offensively. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say he's like, really dynamic key piece that you need to have on the team. So if that's where they're going to use their savings is to sign Evan Fournier, I don't see that that's a big boost. And everybody's saying, well, man, look at this. Now they got Brown and Robert Williams and Al Horford. They have a nice big man rotation. Well, I think all those guys come with solid question marks. Health is a question mark for two of those three guys. Brown, again, I liked what I saw out of him, but he's kind of is an NBA dinosaur in a lot of ways because it's not like he's tall and strong, but it's not like he has any sort of range to his game. I don't know that Brad Stevens did his due diligence in gauging the value of Kemba Walker. Should one of these teams who are still playing get eliminated, maybe they think Kemba is the piece that puts them over the top and potentially they make a more lucrative trade offer for him. Maybe you don't have to actually give up the first round pick. Maybe Dallas is interested in him and you could swap terrible contracts with him and Porzingis. Porzingis isn't good, but at least his age lines up more with Brown and Tatum. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't think it's a terrible trade by any means. It seems like more of a lazy trade, one step forward, one step backwards. I don't really think they accomplished anything.
Was it a case maybe where Brad Stevens said, okay, this trade I can be graded out as a B. Let me make it right now and get it done with. If I wait too long and then can't move Kemba Walker and can't get much back in return, now that deal would be graded as a C. I mean, you always want to have a grade on your trades, but you'll take a B rather than a C. And maybe it's Brad Stevens saying, I'm the new sheriff in town. I'm going to make deals. I'm not going to hold on to assets and sit back and dick around with every trade I try to make and then put forth through whatever media contacts I have that I'm in on every player when the case in point is they're not in on any players. I mean, they were in on James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, and Anthony Davis, and everybody was coming here, and then no one came here, and then they lost everybody to the point where the roster now is nowhere near what it was 2 years ago. So I like the deal. Again, I think you bring up a good point about Moses Brown. Like, why would you move on from him if he showed that much promise? Maybe because the game I really zoned in on him was against the Celtics, midway through the season, and he put up a 20-20 game. He looked like the best player on the floor. I'm like, who is this guy? And then you find out, he went to the same high school as Kareem, Archbishop Malloy in New York, went to UCLA, 7'2". It's like, he's not going to be Kareem. We know that. But he's very young. And again, he gives them another piece up front. And I'm thinking that there's going to be another shooter drop. I would think Tristan Thompson is probably the next guy to move, maybe Marcus Smart, but they're going to need to get some sort of help in the backcourt because you have traded a guard for a front court guy. So you're a little short in the backcourt. I don't think that, Peyton Pritchard is going to be the starting point guard next year. You may like that, but I mean, I think he's still better as a bench piece, right? So there's going to be other moves made. I'm just glad they made a move and Kemba wanted out, and that contract is a disaster. So you are trading one bad contract, a real disastrous contract for a bad contract, and it does save the money, which I think is a concern for Wyc Grousbeck. And you brought it up in one of your earlier tweets, and I've been saying it. I think that the Celtics may have some financial problems that they're not letting on about. I mean, they got rid of Daniel Tice at the trading deadline to just save $3-4 million. That didn't seem to make much sense. Again, NBA teams have been hit with pretty sizable losses the last 2 seasons. And maybe Wick is just looking at the bottom line and saying, I can't continue to lose this type of money. I don't know what his financial situation is. All NBA owners are rich. We get that, but there's levels of how rich you are. We know that Tillman Fertitta took a bath during the pandemic because his money is tied up into hospitality, et cetera. So I think it all kind of played into that. I give it a thumbs up on the trade because Walker wanted out. That's obvious. You're bringing back Al Horford. I don't know what his relationship is with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. You talked about is that there's going to be more pressure on them to score, but Kemba Walker was a 19 points per game scorer. Al Horford's about a 14 point per game scorer. So there's a 5-point difference there. But obviously, Horford's a big who can rebound and defend. I think he was good here for 3 years. I think he became a polarizing player, right? Yet the likes of Lou Maloney were like, what's the big deal about this guy? He's the 14-7 guy. And then you had the green teamers like, well, you don't really understand what he brings to the team. I felt somewhere in the middle of like, yeah, he's a good player. He's a good, solid pro. And that's what you get. And if you get that with him for another couple of years, you move on from his contract. It does give them a little cap flexibility next off season, which can help. But now, do they re-sign Evan Fournier? And if they do that, what exactly does that do? He's a guy who can help off the bench as a scorer, terrible defensively, but I guess he can add some element to the team, which you look at all these teams that are remaining, they all have guys that come off the bench that aren't terribly good defensively that can score. And the Celtics do need that part of their team. So I like the trade. I'd grade it as a B plus, not great. It's not a slam dunk, but it's also something they did that they had to do.
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of crushing in a year when the Thunder get, really good value for Kemba Walker after he has an outstanding season in Oklahoma City. That just seems to be what they do. I don't know. It's just
you're just a big fan of Sam Presti. That's what it is.
I do like Sam Presti a lot. I think he's really good at his job. That is probably the most difficult team to run in the NBA based on the market. It's a tiny
small market. It is. But let me ask you this about Sam Presti. He drafted Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden back-to-back years, right? I mean, that's pretty impressive. Durant was the second pick in the draft. I believe Westbrook was fifth and Harden was fourth. I mean, just slam dunks, obviously, all Hall of Famers. They've gone to one finals, right? And that's when they were the baby Thunder and they lost to LeBron and the Heat back in 2012. But really, what have they done? I mean, they had Durant and Westbrook. They got to the conference finals a couple times, couldn't break through when they were alone. And then they went out and got Paul George. That didn't work out, even though Paul George had a decent year. The biggest surprise came with Chris Paul as their point guard when it looked like they were tanking and Chris Paul wouldn't allow that. And they actually were the 5 seed going into the bubble. So, I mean, as great as Sam Presti is, and I think he's an outstanding general manager, what exactly has he accomplished? And you're right. That is a tough market to build in. You'd like to see him in a market where he's got more options than Oklahoma City and maybe a limited budget or whatever the case may be. But, sometimes we do overrate some of these general managers who haven't accomplished enough to be giving them all this praise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if the goal is winning a finals, he hasn't won one. So, okay, it's fair to ding him on that. But I look at it as he made one crucial mistake is that he did not maximize James Harden's trade value when he traded him. I mean, that was really what sank them. I can't blame him for Kevin Durant jumping ship because and that's really what ended up, sinking the team. And so maybe they stuck with Westbrook a year or so too long before they, really maximize the trade value of him. But I think that this is what they're doing right now is in an exceptional way to rebuild a team that can't really acquire free agents. So they're going to do it all through the draft. I think they identified a very, very good player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to trade Paul George for. And the Clippers had them over a barrel because Paul George was saying, I'm just going to go to LA in a year if I don't, or whatever, when my contract's up. So I think he's excellent. And what they're doing right now is, they're asset collecting, and that enables you to, if you should want to have enough pieces to trade for a disgruntled star potentially, who's still under contract, and that happens all the time, or he seems like he's pretty good at drafting. So, I mean, I would guess that he'd be able to nail a couple of these picks. I think they'll be good in 2 years. I think they'll be really good, and then maybe competing for a championship in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brad Stevens did the best job with what he had to deal with, making as much, making chicken salad out of chicken shit. Because I mean, Kemba Walker's contract is one of the worst in the NBA. So you had to
But
get
it's not
out
like
of
Al
that.
Horford's is good. I mean, let's not. I mean, he traded a terrible contract for a bad contract.
That's pretty much what it is. Yeah, I would call it a disastrous contract. It could be the worst in the NBA because he can't play back-to-back nights. And obviously, 5'10", 5'11" guards, once they reach their early 30s, they tend to lose it quite a bit. I mean, other than, say, Chris Paul, but that's because Chris Paul doesn't play on athleticism. He plays more on feel and skill. So, yeah, I think it just is make it agree on this, that it was a pragmatic deal. And then that's the best could happen. It's not going to vault the Celtics into like the third best team in the Eastern Conference. We know that they've still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I agree. And, I'm sick of obviously having the draft pick, so I don't really care about moving it, though.
Yeah.
I'd rather them just do what some of these other teams have done and trade $1 billion picks for a good player. But, yeah, I mean, it's not a bad trade. It's just, I want to see some sort of vision for the team. And I don't like that the guy that they acquired is, 10 years older than Brown and Tatum. I just don't see the mechanism towards building a team that's competing for a championship with these two guys. Obviously,
he's not going to be a building block. I mean, I think he's just going to be a piece, whether he starts or comes off the bench. Would you take him over Tristan Thompson at this point in their career? Probably. He gives you. Well, I think it's they offer different things. I get it. I mean, Tristan Thompson's not a great defender. Al Horford's been a better defender. Can stretch the court a little bit more. Thompson's a better rebounder. I think it's reshuffling the lawn chairs on the Queen Mary at some point,
right? So I'd give it
Titanic. So I would say
I'd give it a C then.
Yeah, I'd give it a B. I think it was for what they had to do and what they had to deal with. I think he did okay for himself, especially it's his first deal. But there's going to be something else that happens. This is not the end of the offseason. In fact, he's the first team to really make a move.
Do you think Al Horford right now, when both healthy, is a better player than Kemba Walker?
They're very similar. I mean, they're both at their best, they're like level 3 stars. Like they made the All-Star team. I think they've each made 4 or 5 All-Star teams. So that's, pretty good. I don't think either one's a Hall of Famer. Horford's bigger, can help you defensively. No, I mean, when Kemba's first year here, he was really good. Then the knee injury, and then from there it went downhill. And then the rumor that he was offered in a trade in the offseason, and that soured him. And then his second year here, he couldn't play back-to-back nights. So they just had to get out of that contract, and this is probably the best they could do with it. But there'll be other moves to be made because now they have too many bigs, and I think Tristan Thompson would probably be the next guy out. I'd like to see Moses Brown and Robert Williams here, see what happens for another year. They're both very young, maybe some upside there that you can build with and, move on from Tristan Thompson. I don't know how he fitted in here either, but they still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I want to say, Sap, in regards to this is I know Kemba Walker's contract was terrible and they had to get rid of it. I don't disagree with that, but I do feel like in order to do that, they did get worse. I think Kemba's still a better player and would contribute to this team more than Al Horford. So I don't like any move that, even if it helps you financially, I do think that they got worse. And I just can't be excited about that. That's my, that's really my 2 cents on it.
Watch out for my man Moses Brown. He's going to surprise.
I hope he's really good, but and again, that's the most intriguing part of this. But the alarm bells went off in my head when I said he's under cost control. He's young. He plays a valuable position in the NBA. The Thunder just threw him in there.
Unless Sam Presti really likes first-round picks, and that's apparent because he has 18 of them over the next 7 years. Maybe he looked at the 16th pick in this year's draft and said, "Ooh, that's pretty interesting." Now he's going to have 3 first-round picks this year. I believe 16, 18, and wherever the Oklahoma City Thunder fall in the draft lottery, probably 4th. So, he'll have 3 of the top 18 picks. And, he likes that. And he's been good at drafting mid-range, first round players, something Danny Ainge was not good at. And again, I always push back when people go, well, the 14th pick in the draft means absolutely nothing. I mean, we may see 2 13th overall picks meeting in the Western Conference Finals as the best players on the court in Devin Booker and Donovan Mitchell. So, I mean, tell Phoenix and Utah that the 13th pick is useless because they drafted all-star caliber players. You can find players there. You just have to be good at it. And Danny Ainge was just never good at that. He was better late in the first round because that's where he got Peyton Pritchard and Robert Williams III than he was in the middle of the first round with the likes of, Neesmith and Romeo Langford, who to me, neither one of those guys is going to be an impact player at all.
Yeah, I wish that the Celtics could have given up Grant Williams instead of the first round pick, but whatever.
Well, yeah, I think we'd all be in favor of that, but I think Grant Williams is either stuck here or going to be waived at some point.
Brad Stevens is going to name him captain of the team at this rate.
Probably, or maybe he's going to be the head coach.
Maybe. All right, Sap. So that was the big breaking news in the NBA this morning, but there was actually a game last night. You had this one accurately predicted. I did not. The Bucks showed some cojones. They won 104-89 over the Nets. The Nets really didn't put up all that much of a fight in this one, as Jeff Green was not able to duplicate his game from the night before. Kevin Durant was still pretty good, but not as great as he was the night before. And this is going to a game 7, which will be in Brooklyn. Sap, Milwaukee just played a pretty solid game all around. Giannis attacked the basket. Chris Middleton was fantastic. Drew Holiday was okay. And that really is all that they needed. And they were able to beat this Nets team.
Yeah, Chris Middleton was outstanding. He was the best player on the court last night. 38 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 steals. Great stat line by Chris Middleton. Late in the third quarter, you felt like Brooklyn was getting closer to getting back into the game. And he put up 6 straight points towards the end of the third quarter. And I think that kind of sealed the game for Milwaukee. In 3 home games in this series, Chris Middleton's averaging 30 points, shooting 53% from the floor. In 3 road games in this series, he's averaging 18 points, shooting 33% from the floor. So if someone can get into Chris Middleton's head and tell him that game 7 is going to be in Milwaukee, not Brooklyn, then the Bucks can win that game 7. He's been a completely different player at home and on the road. Now, your role players, your secondary players, obviously tend to play better at home, but Middleton's a borderline all-star. He has played in 2 all-star games. You would think he'd be a little bit more consistent than that. He's the X factor in this. Giannis, is frightening and frustrating as he is to watch at times. And last night, he played closer to the way he's supposed to play. Go into the basket, didn't attempt a three-pointer, was very aggressive. That's what I want to see from Giannis. They have no rim protection, the Nets. They really don't. I mean, the only time that Drew Holiday was not affected when he decided he was going to take threes. Other than that, when he was going to the basket, he was unstoppable. Milwaukee just has to approach this like a physical football team that's going to run the ball down the other team's throat. And if they do that, I think they can be in good shape even in game 7. But you need Middleton to step up big in game 7. Giannis is a guy who's going to put up numbers. Like even in game 5, he put up big numbers. It's just, in crucial moments, he wasn't very good. You didn't have to worry about that last night because this game was pretty much settled with 6-7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So impressive by the Bucks. The Nets, I mean, Durant only had 2 free throw attempts after having 16 the game before. So obviously PJ Tucker and the rest of the Bucks were allowed to play physical against Kevin Durant. That's probably not going to happen in game 7. James Harden looked maybe a little better on the court last night.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't play much better than he did.
Yeah, he couldn't. I mean, he's still nowhere near close to even 60%. He's out there on one leg, and he's a skilled guy. And he
still
knows
playing
how to play,
40 minutes.
Which is amazing. I mean, I think at some point you'd want to – there was a theory out there, like, don't play him in game 6, let him rest, and you have game
Reggie
7
Miller's
to fall back on.
Dumb theory that he wanted Harden and Durant to miss this game.
Well, not Durant. Durant can play in his sleep.
That's what Reggie Miller wanted.
Well, good for Reggie. He never really won an NBA championship, did he? Yeah, so I think it's going to be a fascinating game 7. Look, the team that wins that game tomorrow night is probably going to become the favorite to win the title, right?
Yeah.
When you look at it. I mean, we said that before this series, that the team that wins this series is most likely going to be the favorite to win the title. And we see Philadelphia imploding at the end of games. We see Phoenix that advanced nicely. But what's up with Chris Paul? Is he going to miss 1 or 2 games in the Western Conference Finals? And the Clippers may advance without Kawhi Leonard. So the NBA championship may be decided Saturday night at Barclays between the Bucks and Nets. I like the Bucks in that game. I think when they're focused, taking the ball to the basket, stick with my pick. I think they can get this thing done. And it would be pretty impressive because they blew game 5. Most people felt they wouldn't even be showing up for game 6. Give them credit. As you said, they showed a lot of cojones, won that game handily. I don't think that Brooklyn was that invested in that game. It didn't seem like there was a sense of urgency on the part of the Nets, but now it's game 7. It's going to be urgent on both benches. And I like the Bucks' chances. I think that, again, if Chris Middleton is closer to the way he played at home than he's played on the road, I think Milwaukee can win game 7.
We still don't know what the status of Kyrie Irving is going to be. I'm not sure if he's going to play in game 7 or not. Obviously, he wouldn't be 100%. Even if he's not, I think that makes a pretty big difference if he does play. I'm not going to, even with all these injuries, I picked Brooklyn, so I'm not going to back off them. I like them at home, and I don't think that the Bucks role players have shown enough on the road. Middleton, it's weird. He's a veteran. There's no reason he should be have such bad home road splits.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's 12 points per game more at home and 20 percentage points better on his field goal percentage. That's what you normally see in a role player or,
right. This is a multiple-time all-star who's been, in the league for a while. I don't really get it. I agree. I think whoever wins the game wins the title. I think they put themselves in the best position to win it because I don't have any faith in Philadelphia anymore. They've literally, like you said, just imploded. And I've never been super high on Phoenix or Utah, and the Clippers obviously are playing with one hand tied behind their back because they don't have Kawhi. So I truly believe this is the game that will decide the NBA championship, barring injuries, whatever in future rounds. So it's a massive game. I'm really excited to watch it. I think Giannis was really, really good in this game, and you said he doesn't have a feel for the game, and I think often that's true. And I think last night he did play with more of a feel for the game and attacked with purpose. 6 of 10 for the free throw line is not great, but you live with that for Giannis, about 50%. Okay. We can't expect much better, I guess. It's not Ben Simmons for 15 from the free throw line. So you certainly take it. And fortunately, it's not like, free throws were the difference in this game. What's interesting to me, Sap, is he had 21 points last night, but Drew Holiday has yet to have a really good game in this series. He was 8 of 21 from the floor, 1 of 10 from 3. So it's not like he shot the ball particularly well. Kind of waiting for him to have a big game because he hasn't shot the ball well at all this series. I know he's not like a dead eye shooter, but he's better than this.
Which leads you to believe maybe he's sitting on a big game in game 7 because the guy is an all-star caliber player. If he can hit 35, 40% of his threes in game 7, say he goes 4 for 10 from 3, that could be the difference between losing and winning for the Milwaukee Bucks. And look, he always plays good defense. He's able to drive the basketball pretty effortlessly because if he's got James Harden on him, there's no way in hell James Harden's going to stay in front of him. So I liked Milwaukee's approach last night, especially Giannis going strong to the basket. They also had an edge, fast break points, 26-4. Milwaukee had that edge because, again, Milwaukee is really good in transition because Giannis is unstoppable in transition. I can't think of, other than LeBron James, Giannis is probably the best player in transition in the league. The guy can get a defensive rebound, take 3 strides down the court, and he's at the opposition free throw line, and he's going to the basket. He's that fast, that big, that athletic. So when they're able to do that, that's all that much better. Of course, to run like that, you have to play good defense. You can't do that when Kevin Durant's, hitting basket after basket. And Durant was 15 of 30 last night. He, too, struggled on the road in this series. He was 35 of 83 in 3 games in Milwaukee. So he didn't play great in Milwaukee, which leads you to believe that he's probably sitting on another 40-point game when they get to game 7.
Yeah.
He's normally put up big numbers in his game 7s. He's only played in 4 game 7s in his entire career, and he's averaged about 30 a game. So he's the last guy you are concerned about what he's going to produce in game 7. He'll be there.
Yeah, and I think there's a little pressure on Brooklyn, but I think most of the pressure
Yep.
is on Milwaukee because
Yep.
they did blow that game 5 and because they're the healthier team. So being on the road with pressure, I don't feel, and a team that's not particularly mentally strong and a coach that's really coaching for his job, I don't feel great about it, but I was wrong last night, and maybe I'll be wrong again. I'm certainly going to be rooting for them. I mean, I've made
Yep.
that pretty apparent. So we'll see what happens. But I think it'll do really big numbers, and I think a lot of people are going to be tuning in because it's a massive, massive game. So we'll go to the games tonight, Sap, before we wrap things up. We got the 76ers and the Hawks at 7:30 Eastern, and then at 10 o'clock Eastern, it's the Jazz and Clippers. The Hawks have a 3-2 lead, and they are in Atlanta. They could end this thing tonight, shocking everybody. The line has Philadelphia favored by 3 points. However, Sap, how do you see this one?
I think Philadelphia is going to come out strong. Again, Milwaukee imploded in game 5 and came out strong in game 6. Philadelphia really imploded twice in the Atlanta series. They should have won game 4. They were up 18. They lost that game. They were up 26 in the second half of game 5. They lost that. The difference is Philly's trying to force a 7th game on the road, right? They're in Atlanta, so you know that crowd's going to be psyched. And Trae Young does not appear to be frightened by the stage at all. I mean, in fact, he embraces it, unlike almost any young player I've ever seen. I mean, he's only in his 3rd year, and he's already very comfortable being the guy on the court, being the alpha dog, and producing for the Atlanta Hawks. Going to be a tough game. The thing is, if Philadelphia builds an early lead, is in the back of their minds of, okay, we had an 18-point lead here last time we were in Atlanta, we lost that. And then just 2 nights ago, we had a 26-point lead at home. We blew that. Like, how can we close this out? It's like a baseball team with a bad bullpen. You know, you have a 4-1 lead in the 7th inning. Your bullpen comes in and you lose 5-4. That's been the story of the Philadelphia 76ers the last 2 games. And again, it goes back to Ben Simmons. You know, if he can hit 6 out of 10 from the free throw line, that'll be a win for him, just like it was for Giannis last night. You know, you're not asking a lot for Giannis and Ben Simmons. Hit 60% of your free throws. I think you can win the game. We'll have to also monitor Joel Embiid. That knee is always a concern. And also, he just doesn't have much left in the tank in the 4th quarter. Who else is going to step up? I think the player under a lot of pressure this game, Tobias Harris. He's their 3rd best player, makes $37 million a year, and he was able to skate the other night with that loss by the Philadelphia 76ers, and he sucked in that game.
Terrible.
He was 2 for 11, just ran away from the moment. Then, you know, sometimes it's great being the 3rd guy, you know, because no one really is expecting much from you. If you have an off night, it's like, well, he's the 3rd guy. You know, he's not Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, and I think he's going to have to play much better. I expect Philadelphia to win this game. This felt like a 7-game series almost from the get-go when, you know, Atlanta really got off to a great start in game 1, and then Philly came back and made it close at the end, and we've kind of been going back and forth. It's been kind of an intriguing series, right? Because best player on Atlanta is what, 6'1.5", Trae Young, and best player on Philadelphia is like 7'1". So it's kind of a contrast in just sheer size. So I think Philadelphia will come out strong. If they don't, then they've got major issues, and Daryl Morey and that front office are going to have to look at making a major move in the offseason because maybe it just doesn't work.
Yeah, do they want Al Horford back? We trade him for Ben Simmons. Perfect. Yeah, you know, I just can't imagine Philadelphia losing this game. It seems hard to believe that the 1 seed would go down to the Hawks in 6 games. Obviously, they're in position to do that. So yeah, I'll take Philadelphia too. You know, with the points. Embiid's had a big game pretty much every game in the postseason, so I can, you know, that's more or less chalk at this point. He's going to have a big statistical game. Ben Simmons has to take more than 4 shots, I would guess, in this game, like he did last game. You know, somebody, hopefully it was Embiid, maybe he grabbed him and pinned him up against the locker and said, "Help me, for the love of God, please."
Yeah, do something. Yeah,
right. So
maybe grab Tobias Harris again. I keep dumping on him, but this is supposed to be your 3rd best player
because you're protecting your guy Ben Simmons.
Well, I'm always protecting Big Ben. I like Ben. I'd like to coach Ben. I think I get more out of him. You know, I think Sigmund Freud may have to get a hold of Ben to fix some of his problems. But the problem I have with Philadelphia is Seth Curry going to put up 36 again, he did in game 5? I mean, he's
been really good, but that's an unreasonable ask.
Yeah, I mean, if you went into game 5 and said Seth Curry's going to have 36 tonight, you're going to say, okay, this is going to be a blowout, right? I mean, this isn't even going to be close. and they ended up losing. So
yeah,
that is a big
you also
ask.
said this the other day, Sap. Is there a lead that Philadelphia can have that you'll feel comfortable with?
No, because their second best player can't shoot free throws. So if you're
That's how you
you're
close.
Atlanta,
Hitting
right?
your free
That's
throws.
exactly how you close. Look Phoenix. They have a lead. The ball's going to be in the hands of Devin Booker or Chris Paul. Chris Paul didn't miss a free throw in the sweep over Denver. Devin Booker's an 85% free throw shooter. Game over, right? I mean, that's pretty simple.
Yeah, it was like with the Warriors for years. I mean, you literally couldn't foul anybody.
No. I mean, the guys are shooting 85, 90% from the free throw line. With Philadelphia, Ben Simmons is going to get fouled because he's the primary ball handler. It's like you can't even hide him. So he's going to have the ball in his hands. I mean, you want to get it to Embiid, who's an 85% free throw shooter. The only thing with Embiid, we saw him miss 2 free throws in the fourth quarter the other night. He looked exhausted, which will lead to missed free throws. You have to have a sizable lead and just keep pounding away, going inside, taking advantage of your size. And look,
because Atlanta's not going to wave a white flag at any point in the game.
No, that team is playing with house money right now, and they're scary. I mean, I just said this the other day. Imagine if they won the title, how incredible that story would be. I mean, we think of the 2004 Pistons as an unlikely champion. This would be even more unlikely.
No, it'd be the most unlikely champion.
The Pistons
for sure
have been going to the playoffs for years. It's not like they just came out of nowhere. The Atlanta Hawks came out of nowhere. In fact, the Atlanta Hawks were 14-20 midway through the season. They changed coaches, and since then they've been maybe the best team in basketball. It's a fascinating story. And if you're Atlanta tonight, you've got a game to play with. So if you're down, you're going to start a hack-a-Ben, right? Just keep hacking him until he goes to the free throw line, and if he doesn't make him, you come back and win. And they got other pieces that are really stepping up. I mean, Lou Williams was huge in Game 5, and he hunted out Seth Curry, who, maybe even actually a worse defender than his brother. I mean, great shooter, but not exactly a great defender. And in the playoffs, when you are zoned in on a team, you start to pick on guys that are not good defenders, and they were able to do that the other night. Lou Williams scoring 13 points in the fourth quarter, primarily on Seth Curry. So those are the matchups that you have to watch out for. But I would think Embiid, is going to dominate, get his ass in the low post where he's really unstoppable, and you go from there.
Yeah. All right. So we both have Philly tonight, and then another Game 6. This one is in LA tonight as the Clippers lead this series over the Jazz 3-2. Utah is actually favored by 2.5 with the line tonight. Sap, give your pick for this one.
I like Utah. I want to see all Game 7s anyway, so that'd be kind of fun. Plus, I'm rooting for Phoenix. So if
it's
this
like the
goes
opposite
to Game
of the
7,
first round where everything was just
everything was a
quickly.
sweep pretty much. Yeah, I mean the Celtics did a great job in getting to 5 games against Brooklyn, but I want to see Phoenix win. So it would be the best thing for Phoenix for the Western Conference semifinal between Utah and the Clippers to go 7. Gives Chris Paul another couple of days to deal with whatever he's dealing with. We still don't know what the situation is with Chris Paul. I mean, we hear he's been vaccinated. Was there sort of contact tracing? Is he tested positive? Is he asymptomatic? No one knows, but it would give him a couple more days of rest. And again, in the long run, that could really work for him because then that shoulder gets even better. And, a guy 36 years old can always use some rest. I want to see Game 7 in this. I think that Utah will come out strong again. I think they have to take the ball to the basket. They're a great three-point shooting team, but I think they were so hot early they took Donovan Mitchell out of the offense. I want to see Mitchell being aggressive tonight from the get-go, getting to the basket where he's really strong because the Clippers really don't have a rim protector either, and then they would be controlling the pace of play. And do you trust Paul George to replicate what he did in Game 5? I mean, Paul George has had some big playoff games, and then he generally follows them up with stinkers. So I kind of expect that to happen, and I think Utah will win and force Game 7.
Yeah, I think it is a big ask for Paul George to have to replicate that because he was just so outstanding. He was Kawhi-like in the last game. I do like that. We talk about the Clippers not really having a home court advantage, which is true, but I do like that it is in LA for them because Utah has been so good at home. The Clippers, like the Hawks, sort of playing with house money right now because of the Kawhi injury. I know everybody's expecting them to get to the conference finals, but that changes quickly once your best player goes down. I actually think they're going to win it tonight, Sap.
Okay.
I think Donovan Mitchell's just not right. He's maybe at 70%. Utah relies a lot on their depth and their role players, and those role players are very good. But as you've mentioned many times, on the road is a little bit different. So I think that the Clippers will pull it out, which would create a very strange potential matchup in the Western Conference Finals with one team that doesn't have their best player and another team that doesn't have their best player.
Yeah, because we don't know when Chris Paul will come back or what he's going to miss in terms of games. And then the dynamic of Chris Paul going against the Clippers would be fantastic. And then Phoenix trying to beat the second LA team. They already beat the Lakers, took care of business against them, and now they'd be going back to LA. It'd be very interesting storylines. I mean, no matter what happens in this round, we're going to be left with 4 teams that all have some sort of interesting storyline. Like, if Brooklyn wins, is Kyrie coming back? How healthy is James Harden? If Milwaukee gets there, can they finally break through? Atlanta's the sleeper from nowhere that could crash the party, right? Philadelphia, can it work with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid? And then we look at the other conference where, Kawhi's not playing, Chris Paul's dealing with some sort of COVID issue, and, Utah had the best record this year, but can't seem to play as well on the road as they do at home.
Well, it's interesting, in this round now that we're looking at the case where if Philly, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, the Clippers and Utah, if those teams, any of those teams who don't advance to the next round, it would be considered an utter failure.
Right.
The Clippers and the Nets have a little bit more of an excuse because they're dealing with, significant injuries to their best players. Yep. But it is interesting that, both the 1 seeds are in peril of getting eliminated tonight. And Utah had the best record wire to wire in the NBA. So if they don't get to the conference finals, at least, I think their fans would look at this as a massive disappointment. We know we've talked at length about the Bucks needing to probably get to the finals for their season to not be considered a disappointment. We know what the Brooklyn Nets expectations were. Philadelphia, the expectation was winning the championship this year. So if they don't even make the conference finals, that should be considered a major disappointment. And the Clippers, even though Kawhi's out, they've never made the conference finals. So it's disappointing just by virtue of just do something that you've never done before. So there's going to be some unhappy fan bases, in the next couple of days that are really disappointed. And that might result in a really tumultuous offseason with moves and, desperate teams trying to make one last, run at it. So some really, really impactful games. The only team that really is playing with absolutely no pressure on them is the Hawks.
Yeah.
Because anything they win now
question.
is just like, okay, we maybe weren't even supposed to get out of the first round. But the rest of the teams, I mean, they're facing in their own way, facing tremendous pressure.
Yep, they all are. That's what's made it fascinating. I mean, this round's been better than the first round. That's generally the case. The first round, generally, you have out of the 8 series, you'll have 5 that are close to sweeps, where one team is just much better than the other, and then a couple of decent series. At least we've had what looks to be 3 good series. Phoenix took care of business against Denver, advanced a week ago, but 3 out of 4 series have certainly been interesting. Blown leads, injury concerns, Paul George breaking through with the best playoff game of his career, and then what Kevin Durant did in Game 5, so memorable. So it's been a fascinating second round. I think the conference finals will be very intriguing, and then we'll go from there and see who meets in the finals.
All right, Sap. Well, that's going to do it for us today at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about some of these coaching vacancies on a weekend podcast for us, ranking the coaching vacancies, predicting who's going to go where, maybe looking ahead to some of these other games in the weekend. Should there be game 7s? The NBA offseason continues to provide us with plenty of news, even though it's not even technically the offseason yet. So we will be here for all the latest news. Make sure you check out both our Twitters for the latest updates on the show, at JohnSapp25 or at Jet Stryer. And the YouTube is youtube.com/Jet Stryer. See you tomorrow, everybody.